Hello and welcome to episode 303 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick here, as always, with
Jason Rabinowitz. Hello, Ian. How's it
Jason.
going?
It's going well. We're halfway through the week and recording the podcast on Sully Day. So happy Sully Day to you.
Ah, yes. Happy Sully Day to all who celebrate, which should be everyone listening to this podcast. Also, Jeffrey Skiles Day. You know, we can't forget him, too. Day could be more than one thing, right?
Absolutely. No, I mean, I would go so far as to include everyone
on board that plane.
That plane. Yes.
Yes. Happy U.S. Airways landing in the Hudson River Day. For those who may not somehow know what we're talking about, but that can't be.
I mean, I think the big surprise here is the fact that it was 16 years ago today.
I don't want to talk about that part.
Fair enough.
It's long enough ago that the movie about it is like 10 years old already.
Oh, man. That's true. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So 16 years ago today, some Canadian geese were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Which is anywhere ever, really.
Yeah, as far as Canadian geese are concerned. But dual engine failure led to a successful ditching in the Hudson River by U.S. Airways Flight 1549 with Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles at the controls. And then everyone got off the plane safely.
Mm-hmm. And some of them ended up in New York. Some went to New Jersey, I think. So, some ended up.
You win some, you lose some.
Yeah, it's okay.
Let's start this episode of the podcast with some news about Flight Radar 24. We don't talk about Flight Radar 24 a lot, but there's a few great new features that we've got out now. And I think that folks are going to be really happy. I know one of them people have been asking for a very long time. The other, I have already had a lot of fun using, so I hope it is fun for other folks as well. First up is the cross-platform filters are now available in the app. So this is the new filters that we released last year on the web and have been working on since then, since the release on the web, on the app version. So that is live now both on Android and iOS. So you can now download the latest version of the app and have your cross-platform filters. So if you have filters on the app that you want to keep, make note of those because they will go away when you download the new app because they will take the web cross-platform filters because of all of the changes we weren't able to port things over. But it does have a ton more functionality, and we'll have a separate video about that likely up next week, walking you through all of the different options with the cross-platform filters. But now when you create a filter in the app or on the web, it'll be available wherever you access Flight Radar 24. So very excited about that.
Yeah,
and
that's good stuff.
To see more folks take advantage of that.
Yeah, I just looked for the first time, and all of the filters I've, ever had set on the web version, which I typically use filters a lot more on, because you could just see more aircraft at once, but they're all here. My LaGuardia in/out, JFK in, JFK out. Sometimes I only want to see aircraft inbound and not outbound.
Yeah.
And also my particular favorite, the one where I can filter down to a specific receiver, being, of course, my own, and only see the aircraft that my actual Flight Radar 24 ADS-B in receiver can see at any given moment, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. And this also includes the ability to have one-click filters for aircraft categories. So remember on the web, this was introduced last year. And so you were able to click, I want to see passenger aircraft only. I want to see cargo aircraft only. I want to see military and government only, or any combination thereof. So those are now available in the app. So you can filter with one tap.
Neat.
And the other thing that we've just released, and this is currently web only and coming to the apps in a future release, is airport history by date. So up until now, you still can see 36 hours plus or minus the current time for scheduled flights at an airport. So you can click arrivals or departures, and you can go 36 hours in the future or 36 hours in the past to see what scheduled flights are like. And if they've occurred already, you can play them back. And if they're in the future, you can see what information we have available on the future flights. Now, we've also added the ability to go back and look at what actually landed beyond the scheduled flights. So including the scheduled flights, but also non-scheduled flights and what landed for a specific date. And so this takes the form of historical data that is based on your subscription level. So if you're a silver subscriber, you can go 90 days in the past, gold 365 days, and the business users can go back 3 years in the past to see what landed at a particular airport and then click on that flight and access playback and things like that. So I'm really excited about this feature. I've used it a bunch already just in the few days that it's been released. So if you're looking to check that out, we'll put a link in the show notes to the blog post that explains a little bit more, or you can just have a click through to the airport history by date on the airport info panel on the web. And that'll, again, be coming to the apps in the near future.
Very nice.
So we're moving right along to start the year. And we've got a ton more good stuff. Dare I say, great stuff coming up throughout the year. So I'm excited about all the new features that we're going to be bringing out over the course of this year.
Cool.
We have an update on the flight data and cockpit voice recorder from the Jeju Air 737-800. We knew that the recorders had been sent to the NTSB lab in Washington, D.C. They were read out over the course of a few days. And on the 11th of January, the South Korean ministry announced that the recorders, while the data has been downloaded, the recorders did not record the last 4 minutes of the flight. So it's now been confirmed that we do not have that data. They are looking to explain exactly why that data is not available, but that'll come out in the course of the investigation. So unfortunately, we don't have the full flight, but we're confirmed that it is now 4 minutes that are missing.
Yeah, that is extremely disappointing. Of course, the last 4 minutes of that flight are really the only consequential minutes that are going to matter. Obviously, something happened and that will likely be captured on the audio, but all of the questions that we have that keep getting mounted one after the other at this point, it's increasingly unlikely we're going to find out exactly what happened on that aircraft. Not that maybe it doesn't even matter all that much because we know what the sequence of events was and it almost doesn't matter how they ended up in that particular situation. But from a crew resource management perspective and just figuring out what happened for closure for the families, it's looking increasingly unlikely that that's going to happen. Whether there was a malfunction of some sort for those recorders, they'll have to see, but more likely it was a simple loss of electrical power to these pieces of equipment and they just stopped recording would be my best guess, which is extremely unfortunate.
Yeah, that is possibly the case.
Possibly, we don't know.
The most likely explanation at this point, but again, we don't know, and the South Korean investigators will be looking into that. They've said they want to find out exactly, what the sequence of events was leading up to that, and obviously we'll know more as they publish their reports. Turning our attention now to the concrete encased localizers, a review of South Korean airports has found 9 installations at 7 separate airports where the localizer was installed atop a large concrete foundation or platform. Those airports are being looked at to see what changes are necessary. An interesting note, the airport at Muan, the distance and location of the localizer was outside the area that it was required to be outside. Basically, it followed all the regulations. So it sounds like they're also hinting they will review those regulations to perhaps further make sure that you don't put a giant concrete barrier at the end of the runway.
Yes.
Even if it's beyond where we've said it should be before.
That would be a prudent decision to do. Just because the regulations set it out that way doesn't mean the regulations don't need to be updated, because clearly there's some very overwhelming evidence that the regulations were not sufficient in all cases.
Yeah. Let's go to Phoenix, where earlier this week, a plane spotter filmed a TCAS resolution advisory, which was how this kind of all came to our attention. A plane spotter was filming in Phoenix and saw a Delta A330 and a United 737 rather close to each other. And from there, we learned more. The United flight was on approach for runway 07 left. The Delta flight was approaching, flying due south ready to make the turn east so that it could approach runway 8 when they came into conflict, and both responded to TCAS advisories. The United flight climbed, the Delta flight descended, and then they were both turned away from each other. They were less than 1,000 feet vertically and a bit more than 1,000 feet laterally at their closest point. At their closest point vertically, they were just 425 feet apart, but nearly 0.8 of a mile apart. It was a clear day as well. So this isn't one of those things where it's so close, I guess. But anytime TCAS is involved, things were too close.
Yes, but yet again, we are exceptionally thankful for this miraculous piece of technology that saves the day over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made that the pilots would have seen and avoided without TCAS, but better to have TCAS than not.
Well, the problem with seeing and avoiding is that there might not be communication between the two pilots seeing and avoiding, which we know if they both decide to deviate up, that's a problem. So that the real magic of TCAS isn't simply knowing that, hey, we're in conflict. It's telling one plane to do one thing and another aircraft to do the opposite of that thing and sync with each other, which is really, considering how everything else in this industry is sometimes so janky, doesn't really work the way it should be, or isn't very complex enough. TCAS being able to do that completely independent of air traffic control, I think is still pretty amazing.
It's an amazing technology, and it has saved countless numbers of lives. So let's keep going with that.
Sure.
The FBI is searching for, and I won't say the words that I have put in the show notes, but
they're a doozy.
An unwise person. The FBI is searching for an unwise person who was flying a drone that was then struck by one of the Canadian loaned super scoopers fighting the Palisades fire. The nice thing for the FBI and for all of us who want to see whoever this was punished to the fullest extent of the law is they have the drone. This isn't one of those things where, we think it was a drone. It could have been a drone. Maybe saw a drone. No. The FBI has the drone.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but a part of the whole legislation from years ago was that drones over a certain weight, which this one almost certainly was, need to be registered with the FAA and need to have a registration number somewhere physically on that drone too, right?
It's not clear if this one met the weight limit for that. And
I would imagine it was, given the damage done to the aircraft. That's kind of...
Yeah.
I
don't know.
So.
I have not weighed the drone myself. No. However,
someone at the FBI has.
Yes. And I'm betting that they are doing everything they can to figure out who bought it.
Yes.
And who it belonged to. And
as a
I
reminder,
really hope that person suffers consequences.
Yes. As a reminder, do not fly a drone in any area at or even nearby, remotely nearby, where there are aerial firefighting operations in effect, because if you put your drone up, this could happen. And if this can happen, it means they can't operate. And the consequences of that could literally be life or death for some people. If you happen to see, if you're watching YouTube videos or anything and you happen to see some drone footage taking place where there's active fire, even over areas that were burned down, make sure to leave a comment yelling at them or saying, hey, could you even not use this content in your video? I know you didn't shoot this video, but you shouldn't even use it because it's super illegal and dangerous for anyone to do that. And I love when I do see the comments on videos that say that, because it's just... Not everyone might know that if you put your tiny little drone up in the air, a DC-10 can't come and put out a fire, but that's actually what happens.
Yeah, I think that's definitely worth noting. And I think that in this particular instance, I hope an example is made because of the information that we have here. And that, this is one of those things that stops happening, but I don't hold out hope.
Yeah, especially with aerial firefighting. Remember, these aircraft get down to 150, 100 feet above the ground. They are much lower than you can fly a typical DJI drone. You can fly that thing much higher than an aircraft fighting a fire. So it is not out of the realm of possibility that this is possible with any consumer level drone. So just don't do it.
Yeah, that's solid advice. Well, let's go to Atlanta, where it was just a really, really bad day for Delta last week.
It snowed in Atlanta? It does that?
It snowed in Atlanta, and then a Delta 757 had an engine failure, and they evacuated via the slides on the runway.
Yeah, not a great day. So already we all know Atlanta doesn't do all that well when it doesn't even have to snow. It could just get cold and Atlanta freezes over and things don't work. But early in the morning, I think it was in the 9 o'clock hour, things were kind of moving at Atlanta. Things were okay. And this 21-year-old 757-300 was going down the runway and had some sort of engine failure. It's actually caught on video by an extremely enthusiastic plane spotter out there in Atlanta.
Ooh, we should put that in the show notes.
We should, because it's just fun to watch. A very cold plane spotter in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And of course, the aircraft came to a stop behind some other like 737, so you can't see much, but really snarled up ATL for hours on end. I don't know, but this may have been the only operational runway at the time because it was probably maybe the only one cleared of snow. But a lot of flights canceled, a lot of aircraft delayed overnight. Just not a good day for Delta.
No, not a good day for Delta. So we'll await to see any report on the engine failure. But no injuries among the folks on board. So that was nice. And everything got moving eventually.
As it always does.
As it always does. Last episode, we talked about the complete reconfiguration of Condor's long-haul routes because of a German court ruling saying that Lufthansa no longer had to provide special pricing for feeding traffic to Condor's flights.
You know what?
In Europe.
Never mind about that. Let's just pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah, not only never mind about that, the European Commission also says, hey, about that transatlantic joint venture that you have with United and Air Canada.
Ooh, this is
could be bad.
Good. So yeah, now the European Commission, specifically, interestingly, looking to prevent harm on the Frankfurt to New York route, which is actually a route that Condor has not withdrawn. They are looking to protect passengers specifically because of this route, that if Condor's Frankfurt to New York route is no longer profitable, it will go back to practically being a monopoly for Lufthansa, which apparently somebody at the European Commission is not too happy about that. They are not happy about it. And you know what? I am not happy about it. I don't like any of that. But apparently the European Commission has gone so far as to order Lufthansa to reinstate Condor's access to Lufthansa feed traffic upon the conditions set last year in June 2024. So that's real interesting. Maybe if Lufthansa didn't act so quickly to pull down that agreement and really kind of screw over Condor's entire business model, maybe the European Commission wouldn't have acted like this. But yeah, saving grace for Condor. I wonder if they're able to put their flights back in the schedule or what happens here at
I wonder what they'll do.
Know. Too bad this didn't happen ahead of the changes. But that last bit, this feels like it warrants more than the release provided by the European Commission, because the investigation of what they call the A++ transatlantic JV, which is the joint venture between Air Canada, United, and Lufthansa for the Atlantic routes, where they kind of price fix legally. The whole thing has always been questionable. They're not alone. Delta, Virgin Atlantic, Air France, KLM have their own. So they're not alone. These JVs are not unique to Air Canada, United, Lufthansa.
American BA. I mean,
there are plenty of these.
Yeah.
But the European Commission has specifically taken an interest in the Lufthansa, Air Canada, United Atlantic joint venture, which is really interesting because I don't think these should be a thing anymore. I don't see why these airlines should be able to legally price fix. And what I mean by that is if you've ever looked at flights that, let's say, between New York and Europe, United will have the same fare as Air Canada, which has the same fare as Lufthansa, and BA will have the same fare as AA, and Delta will have the same fare as Air France and KLM. To a degree, there's some deviation there, but they have agreements in place that are immunized by the law to let them set a price and collaborate amongst the joint venture to set a joint price. I hope something comes of this, but I don't know. It kind of is odd as being a footnote to this Condor thing.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a footnote to the Condor thing. It's an inclusion. So the release that the European Commission put out was based on what is called, and of course, this is a European Commission term, a supplementary statement of objections.
Oh,
So there was an initial statement of objections to Lufthansa. Then this is a supplementary statement of objections. And so what the EC is looking at is two parts. One is the JV. So does this joint venture restrict competition? And as part of that, they're saying, well, this action by Lufthansa to get rid of the special prorated pricing for Condor, that definitely violates competition. So you have to put that back.
take it all down. I don't care. Get rid of these JVs. They have their benefits. There are some consumer-friendly aspects of it, but when push comes to shove, it's price fixing, legal price fixing, which doesn't really fly in a lot of other industries. You see what I did there?
I see it.
I did the thing.
I was going to let that one fly by.
We have to move on.
All
This
right.
has to stop.
Let's talk more about Lufthansa. Let's talk about the fact that Lufthansa is retiring its oldest A320 now, or has retired. Serial number 401. First
Wow.
flew in January of 1993 and ends service with Lufthansa on the 14th of January 2025 after 32 years of service. It's not the oldest A320 out there, still flying on a regular basis.
Is that still out in South Africa with like Flyer?
So one of the oldest ones is with Jordan Aviation, and that's a 1989 model. But it's up there. It's definitely up there. I'm trying to figure out what the retirement of this particular aircraft does for the average age of the Lufthansa A320 fleet, and it drops it dramatically.
Was this one an outlier?
This one was particularly old. So the next oldest A320 in the Lufthansa fleet is only 24 years old.
Okay. So yeah, that is pretty significant. Wow.
So they were hanging on to that one for a while.
Yeah. And yep, you are right. The oldest A320 out there in operation is with Jordan Aviation, line number 29, did you say? 36.1 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't mention the line number, but
Is that even a commercial
digits.
airline? I don't even know who they are.
They do charter work and stuff.
Oh, that kind of counts then.
I mean, it's, regular flying.
Okay, well, the oldest non-charter aircraft, A320, that you can go buy a ticket on and fly is, in fact, Lyft in South Africa, operated by Global Aviation. That would be line number 64, a ripe 35 and a half years old today.
Hey, there you go.
Started life with Braniff. Wow.
Whoa, all right.
Damn. That'll tell you all you need to know about that airplane. It went a whole 2 months before it was withdrawn from use and ended up at America West, U.S. Airways, American Airlines, Global Aviation, Fly Baghdad, Dalo Airlines, Global Aviation, Mango, Corendon Airlines, Global Aviation, and finally Lyft. So it's one of those planes.
There you go. Wow. All right. Let's talk about some new planes because we now have numbers for 2024 deliveries by Airbus and Boeing.
We're going to give you one guess on which company posted better numbers. I don't think you're going to get it, though.
Embraer.
Wow. That's a curveball. No.
Well, to be fair to Embraer delivered more than half the number of aircraft that Boeing delivered last year.
Ooh, that's
so.
That's not
that tells you more about Boeing's deliveries.
Yeah. Let's get into the numbers then. Take it away.
So Airbus delivered 766 aircraft, which was close to its revised goal of 770 aircraft, though they had started the year, I believe, at 800 as the goal, and then revised it midway through the year. Boeing delivered not that many, just 348 aircraft, though this does include the fact that they weren't building or delivering aircraft for quite some time in the second half of the year. They also weren't building or delivering aircraft in the first half of the year delivering aircraft, I should say, after the 737 MAX 9 mid-cabin door plug blowout.
Not great. Less than half. Boeing posting numbers less than half of Airbus this year, almost exactly half on the revenue side, too. Orders, not great either. There's a great graphic put together by the team at the Seattle Times, sent out by Dominic Gates, that really breaks it all down into small narrow body, all the way up to the large wide body cargos. But Airbus pulled in 826 net orders valued at $71 billion. Then there's Boeing at 377 at $36 billion. There were a number of pretty noteworthy issues throughout the year. I hope it's an outlier year for Boeing, but clearly airlines are still a bit spooked when it comes to ordering Boeing aircraft. But Airbus is not out of the woods on its own, is it?
No, it's not. So Boeing's net orders were a total of 377. That includes new orders of 417 737s, but cancellations of 173 for a net of 244 orders.
And I think some of those were orders being just taken off the books because they couldn't be accounted for anymore. Like I think Jet Airways had a bunch of aircraft on order that were finally removed.
Yes, 135.
Yeah, so that's a lot of airplanes.
Yes.
But it's not great. There's not a lot of confidence in Boeing right now. Obviously, they've proven unable to deliver even their simplest of aircraft, but they're not alone. Airbus, on the other hand, booked a total -9 net orders for the A320 in 2024. The only aircraft categorized here at all in any way to have a negative net order. So that's great. That has a net value of $0.4 negative billion. Not great times for the little Airbus right now. Not hard to understand why. If I were an airline shopping for an airplane and I saw what's going on with the engines on that A320, I would run so far away until that aircraft is proven to be rock solid. So not that surprising.
Yeah, to Jason's point, the Pratt & Whitney issues continue to affect, acutely the A220, but also, other members of the Airbus family, the A320neo family. So I think it shows the appetite for both the risk from the engine, but also just the appetite for that particular aircraft right now, which is interesting to me because, the airlines continue to place these massive orders for A320neo and A321neo aircraft, but the A220 is just not feeling the love.
Airbus said that the order intake for last year came lower than expected.
Yes.
They say the market segment generally has been weak, but they say things should improve in 2025. I hope they're able to prove that the 220 is able to, be in the air more than not in the air would be a start. So Boeing is not alone.
It's always a plus for an airline.
Yeah, in troubled aircraft. A little A220, what they call it way back when? Cute little airplane? Troubled little cute little airplane these days.
There you go. Worth noting, this was flagged, I believe, first by John Ostrower over at the Air Current, but worth noting, it seems that Boeing may have finally delivered the last 777-300ER. This was a frame built long ago. It had its first test flight pre-pandemic.
Damn.
And then it was not taken up by China Southern and sat around for a few years. And right before the new year was delivered, still in a basic China Southern color scheme, to Ethiopian Airlines. So it is now registered ET-BBG. And
it's been a long time since Ethiopian's taken delivery of a 777-300ER, almost 10 years, actually. Just under 10 years. It's now an aircraft that's completely configured differently than all the rest of them, so that's fun for me. But that's weird. It almost seems like Boeing wanted to pad the number, get that aircraft out, and said, anybody, please just take this aircraft and just give it a nice home already.
Give it a
please.
Nice home. Somebody, please.
Somebody take it. It's been here for 5 years. That's crazy. An aircraft that's sought after, I guess, right now. The last one delivered. Had to sit around for 5 years.
So it'll be interesting to see how long it takes Boeing to deliver the first 777X. So we've got the
Be a
clock
minute.
on what we believe to be the last 777-300ER.
Maybe they'll find another one under the couch or something. We don't know.
Did somebody lose one in the cushions, maybe?
Yeah, who knows?
Was it last week or the week before, we discussed the U.S. Department of Transportation filing suit against JetBlue for what it termed chronically delayed flights that JetBlue should have known not to operate or file the schedule that way because they knew it was going to be delayed. Now, today, DOT says, we got more of that.
They got a lot more. So, interestingly, they are fighting Frontier for some chronically delayed flights, but they are actually suing Southwest over its own chronically delayed flights, which is an interesting twist. This is just news that is just hitting. I think the press release was only issued maybe about an hour ago, so I haven't fully read it. But I'm not quite sure yet why JetBlue and Frontier. By the way, the Frontier fine is $650,000. I'm not sure why JetBlue and Frontier get a fine, but Southwest gets a whole fun lawsuit to deal with. That's interesting.
And it's just 2 chronically delayed flight routes.
I guess they're really bad.
That resulted in 180 flight disruptions.
Okay, that's bad.
So
those were, hey, they touch home for you. One flight between Chicago Midway and Oakland, California, and the other between BWI and Cleveland. All right, these happened between April and August 2022. So it's actually a shorter time frame than the JetBlue one, which was over the course of, I think, more than a year. But these flights, each one was chronically delayed for 5 straight months. But I guess we'll have to keep an eye on the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California to figure out why the DOT had to sue Southwest rather than just issuing a fine. I'm not sure why it went down this path or what happens. Maybe the next administration determines, forget it. We don't need to do this. So interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see why the distinction. I suppose we could have put this story just after the Airbus and Boeing deliveries because they kind of go hand in hand.
We'd have to be more organized for that to happen.
To be fair. It seems that Korean Air, like many, many airlines across the industry, will be keeping some older planes around for longer than they wanted to. In our estimation, that's just fine with us.
That's fine.
Because we're talking about the A380 and the 747.
Yeah, unlike other airlines where I don't know if there's anyone out there who's like, man, I'm really happy that Lufthansa's keeping the A340-300 around a bit longer. There's no one out there wants that. But the A380 and the 747-8, yeah, that's the good stuff.
We'll take it.
We'll take it. So apparently Korean was set to retire A380s by 2026 and the 747s, let's hope that doesn't happen, by 2031. But between the takeover of Asiana and delivery delays from both Airbus and, more importantly, Boeing, maybe that's not going to happen. And apparently these aircraft, you can rest easy. You don't have to go out of your way to fly Korean A380 or 748 because they'll be around through maybe the 2030s, early 2030s at least.
There you go.
Good news, especially for the 748, since that is a rare breed of aircraft.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm trying my very best to get on one somehow, somewhere.
Have you never?
Not the Dash 8, no.
Oh, wow. We might have to take a field trip.
So I would not be upset about that. Speaking of field trips, I guess, when there's a rocket launch, it's often an exclusion zone that's a few hundred miles around the launch site. But because of the way Starship works, the airline most deeply affected by a launch from Florida actually is Qantas.
Okay. Ain't too many airlines flying over this particular region of the world. But yeah, that's wild that a launch from Florida affects an Australian airline. What's the details here? This is crazy.
It makes sense, but I had to read it a few times to make sure I was understanding things correctly. So this is affecting Qantas's flights between Sydney and Johannesburg, so QF63. And what happened was Starship was scheduled to launch and then kept getting pushed back. So the Qantas flight kept getting delayed day after day after day because they had to reschedule around the second stage of the rocket, which is scheduled to splash down in an area that could be occupied by the Qantas A380. So they said, better safe than sorry. Let's not have the rocket fall on the A380. That would look bad.
That's a good point.
So we'll delay the flight. The problem is that the launch of the rocket kept getting delayed. And so the flight had to be delayed over multiple days. And the delays were, if I'm a passenger, I would call them significant. We're looking at 90 minutes, almost 3 hours one day. So not great. And I guess this will continue until the launch is done. So
there are exceptionally few flights that take this particular routing and end up where QF63 between Sydney and Johannesburg end up. So it's really a Qantas problem. And are there any South African Airways flights that still do this? I think they operated as well, or they don't really do much anymore, right?
Not to Sydney. South African's back operating to Perth, but I don't know if that flight would be affected given the flight path. And
so this is an unfortunate problem. For once. You can, it's not Qantas's fault. So that's nice. This is going to become a more frequent problem. There are more and more rockets launching. I mean, we see what happens with, was it New Glenn right now? They keep delaying. And every time there's a launch, there's a TFR. And in this case, with SpaceX, is probably a massive TFR for where the splashdown is supposed to be. This is only going to become more common and has already been a major problem along the U.S. East Coast with these launches off Florida, because they have to close off a huge chunk of already extremely constrained airspace. And I just never expected that constrained airspace to be over the middle of the southern Indian Ocean is a new twist.
Yeah. I mean, this is the world we live in. Although I do want to clarify, just for the record, I said Florida, I meant Texas. Starship launches from Texas, not from Florida at the Cape Canaveral Launch Center. But the splashdown area remains the same. Let's go to Air Wisconsin, I guess, is the natural transition that we see here.
Sure. How else could you transition from A380s in the Indian Ocean than going to talk about Air Wisconsin's CRJ-200s?
CRJ-200s.
They are really equal aircraft, after all.
Yeah, in so many ways.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
But for those of you American Airlines passengers who may have found yourself on a CRJ-200 recently, A, I'm sorry that happened to you, and B, it's not gonna happen to you anymore, because Air Wisconsin, a little regional airline in the US that's been kicked around between United and American, won't have an agreement with American anymore very soon. I think starting in April 2025, so that's only a couple months from now, they will end their agreement with American Airlines and they will do their own thing with essential air service routes and charter work and stuff. They will have an interline agreement or a code share agreement with American, but there will no longer be Air Wisconsin, CRJ-200s, and American Eagle branding. And that should make some people pretty happy because you're going to be flying on Envoy E175s from now on.
Yeah. Oh no, said no one.
No one ever. I love the E175. Everyone loves the E175. Maybe one day we'll even love the E175 E2. Probably not anytime soon.
Maybe.
But we are much closer to ridding ourselves of the CRJ-200 here in North America. So close. I think you've got them at United has some left. Am I right? Am I making that up?
I don't want you to be right, but I think
United has, and of course Air Canada, I think maybe. I don't know. If only there was an app where I could pull up some newly renovated filters and then just type in.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's still nearly 100 operating for United.
Ugh.
So, not great.
Ugh. No.
Sorry.
Yeah, actually, I don't think Air Canada operates CRJ-200s anymore, so that's something.
We'll take the wins where we can get them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to Hawaii and talk about Mokulele Airlines, which has temporarily paused operations out of an abundance of caution because of a maintenance issue. This happened today, where the airline, for the second time in, I think, 6 months, has paused all flying out of an abundance of caution due to a maintenance issue. So, something to keep an eye on. They seem to be doing this more often than some other airlines. And I would like to know what happened.
Yeah, hopefully it's nothing more than some paperwork forgot to be signed, or whatever, but never great for an entire airline to take a pause out of an abundance of caution. But I guess it's a good thing that they're doing it because it's out of an abundance of caution.
I like abundance of caution, abundances of caution.
You don't want to have to do it, though, is the point.
Yes, exactly. Air France over the years has allowed us to cover some incredibly interesting stories, sometimes through no fault of their own. The A380 engine failure over Greenland and the extensive search through deep, deep snow for the engine parts and how investigators work to put things together. But they've also given us things like a rooftop bar and a feeling. And now Air France has given us
smells.
I'm
glad. I think you know where I'm going with this because in the show notes,
I do. I'm ready to read the entirety of the marketing copy because it's so ridiculous and I love it.
Fantastic. We could do it because in the show notes, I only wrote the words Air France smells, which could mean anything.
I'm ready for you.
But I will start off reading the press copy here. The title, the headline is AF001, Air France's signature fragrance. Wait. Okay, let's unpack that for a second. Didn't know Air France, an airline, had a signature fragrance, but I love that they named it AF001, not just because that's a flight number, but it's a flight from New York. Whatever. For the first time in history, it goes on, Air France has launched its signature home fragrance, AF001, to create this fragrance. The airline called the talents of Francis Kurgian, I probably butchered that name, master perfumer and artistic director of Maison Francis Kurgian. That's just the guy's name again. Okay. This is yet another opportunity for Air France to showcase the excellence of French expertise all over the world. Ian, where are you going to be able to smell AF001?
Well, Jason, starting today, you'll be able to smell this at the entrance to certain Air France lounges at Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport as a welcome gesture at the start of a journey. You can also discover the fragrance in the lobby, the lounge, and the La Première suites, as well as the lounges located in Terminals 2E, Halls L and M, 2F, and 2G. They will also gradually roll out the fragrance. It's like somebody slowly walking with this bottle to other lounges in Paris and around the world in the coming months.
All right.
So first of all, why did it take months to roll this out? And second of all,
you forgot the best part. You didn't get into the description of the fragrance.
Haven't gotten there yet. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm working up to that.
To me, the smell of AF001, which is the 4:30 p.m. transatlantic flight from JFK to Paris, it's a smell of despair and why did I book this flight so early? And oh my God, I hate JFK Terminal 1. I'm sweaty even though it's 20 degrees outside. It's not a good smell. I don't like it. But yes. Air France has a different take.
But AF001 evokes a feeling of space, calm, and light, Jason. It accompanies travelers in style. Its comforting musky scent, combined with mimosa from the south of France, adds a sunny, natural vibrancy. Created with hints of jasmine and rose, its delicate floral aura takes travelers on a real olfactory journey, capturing a specific moment in time.
I mean, you got to give it to Air France. They had fun writing
They had fun with this. To me, the absolute best part, and we're going to put a link to this in the show notes because the picture of the guy holding a piece of pointy paper, which I assume smells like the scent, and looking as serious as anyone has ever looked in their entire life, I'm trying not to keel over.
It's pretty great. Now they do go on to say that AF001 is not a reference to the terrible 4:30 p.m. flight from JFK. It is a reference to the legendary Concorde flights between New York and Paris in the late 1970s. The name AF001 immediately evokes, there's that word again, the word of Air France and the code specific to air travel. It also reminds travelers of their very first journey. Okay. I don't know what the Concorde smells like. I never flew on a Concorde. If it smells like this, I mean, it must have been a pretty good flight, right?
I also have the video in the background playing. It auto-played, and I didn't stop it because it was just so enjoyable. Because they have the designer, and the perfumer talking about this. But the B-roll they have is him just sniffing the card that he has sprayed with the fragrance while he's writing things on pieces of paper.
Well, I mean, that's how you iterate on your scent and get from just simple orange juice smell to mimosa smell, as they have put in their scent. And I don't want to laugh at this because it's not stupid. There are lots of brands and airlines and hotels that have signature fragrances, but I really do love the tie-in to an airline code and a noteworthy flight number. It's great.
Great branding.
The copy is just so hilarious because I think it's intended to be like that. They're not taking this too seriously. Like there are press releases you'll see that will take a corporate scent as the most important thing that's ever happened. But this plays on it, and I appreciate that.
I think they did a great job. And to be fair, like I think I'm mocking the rollout a little bit. But also, if things are going to smell nice, I'm not going to complain about that.
No, someone will. Someone always does.
But I mean, if it's like a background scent, then so much the better. You know, like Jason said, Air France is not the first to roll this out. There are many, many, many places. And in the airport, the American Express lounges all have a signature scent. And they will send you a scratch and sniff coupon when they want you to apply for their credit card.
That's nice.
Which is just, who doesn't love a good scratch and sniff sticker?
And look, any way to possibly make JFK Terminal 1 smell better and just be less awful
should be applauded.
It
should be applauded. Absolutely. All right. And on that note, this has been episode 303 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.